One, call to order the East Bank Stadium Committee on Wednesday, November 9, 2022. And the first thing on the agenda is the same thing we usually do about the update about upcoming meetings. The next meetings after today will be next Wednesday and Thursday. I forget the start times, but they're for council members. You can check, or anybody, you can check the East Bank Stadium Committee webpage, and the start times are there. They're either 4:30 or 5:30. I think they're both 4:30, but I'm not sure. So next Wednesday and Thursday, the 16th and 17th. And I think the first batch of answers to questions from council members are either posted or going to be posted in the next 24 hours. Keep sending questions in to Ms. Godin in the council office, and we'll keep working with the administration to get them answered. And with that, we will move to the next thing on the agenda, which is stadium design presentation by the Titans team. We've got Burke Nihill from the Titans, Kellen DeCourcy, and David Manica, and I'll hand it over, I guess, to Burke to start. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Before I asked David to walk everyone through the design concept and some of the thinking behind it and the thought that's gone into it, I want to give a little bit of context to how we got here and we got here at this phase, because it's a little bit non-standard. This process really started quite a while ago, probably sometime in 2017 or so. There was this recognition with the Sports Authority that there had to be a better way forward, and we began to explore what the next generation of a stadium might look like. And as I think most of you know, there was a lot of effort over a number of years that were put into a renovation concept. And when those renovation numbers came back in much higher than anticipated, we were at a crossroads. And we had paused the project to reassess, because there didn't seem to be wisdom in just plowing ahead with the renovation at the numbers that we had seen. Pretty quickly, we were very grateful to hear from the state that there was an interest in potentially investing in a new building if it had an enclosure, and that would be a way forward that was worth exploring. But the challenge was twofold. One, we needed to know what a new building would cost with some reasonable degree of certainty before moving forward. And the second thing is, we needed to know that there was a building that would fit on the piece of real estate to the east of the stadium. And so with that, we began to explore architects that would be willing to come on at a very early phase and look into just those two things. The building, in fact, does fit on the parcel to the east of the current Nissan Stadium, which was a little bit of a closer call than I think people anticipated. There's lots of logistics around loading docks and ingress and egress, but in the end, David's team was able to come up with a design that fits and works well on that site. In terms of the needing to know what a building like that would cost, having learned from the experience through the renovation process, we just knew it was critical. God bless you. We knew that it was critical to have as much certainty as you could possibly have as early as you possibly could have it. And so in addition to bringing on David and his team to be thinking through and building out a concept, we also had multiple contractors that were along for the ride that were giving us advice about what budget issues may be coming up as design features were being discussed. They would, for example, suggest this material may be a different material to use because it's just as beautiful, it's just as durable, but you will save $5 a square foot. We really just needed to be responsible to a budget, and yet build a building that would be one that makes Nashville and Tennessee proud, and is also as durable as we all want it to be. And David's team was just the right fit for that process. We interviewed about 8 architects for filling this role, and we just heard over and over again about how David's team thought differently. They're very tech forward, and they were great listeners and really wanted to build projects that were special for communities, and in our experience, that's absolutely proven true. So with that, I will turn over to David Manica.
Thank you, Burke. Let me get this microphone situated. All right, so I'm going to take you on a journey through some of the thinking about the project to date. And I'm going to start with this slide of some other recently constructed NFL stadiums. As you'll notice, they are massive buildings.
Oh, let's make sure it's projected.
Oh, okay. Better? Okay, great. Excellent. Okay, so I was talking about some recently constructed NFL stadiums. These are some examples of some that are on the drawing boards and some that are recently constructed. You'll see they are often like objects sitting on a table with nothing around them. So that is something that we did and absolutely focused on. We understood that this project has to stand on its own. If the development around it does not come, now or in the immediate or near future, it needs to stand on its own and be a part of Nashville and a part of that centrality of its unique location in downtown. But at the same time, we want to think about what it means to be of Nashville. And that was something that's very, very important. I'm going to diverge for 1 second and talk about Michelangelo, the artist. The way he approached his work was he did not sculpt something into the stone. He listened very carefully to what the figure inside wanted to be, and he released it from within. So he removed the extra stone in order to liberate this spirit or this figure inside. And in a lot of ways, I think that's a really beautiful way to think about design, even of buildings. So it's not about people forcing the building to be what it wants to be. It's about listening first, listening very carefully to what the project wants to be, understanding the influences, and then allowing that to grow almost organically through the spirit of the conversation. So we started, before we even drew any lines on paper, we listened very carefully to what the project wanted to be. And we looked at Nashville. We understood that Nashville's more than just a city. It's a collection of really diverse people and places that live in neighborhoods. And we thought about what it meant to be not just a stadium on a plate or in the middle of a parking lot, but what would it mean to be a stadium in the neighborhood that's a part of a vibrant neighborhood, or certainly is also in likewise a good neighbor back in return. So we studied the buildings, also in Nashville, looking at the materials, looking at the spirit of what other designers and artists have done here, and we began to sketch, and we began to think about how those influences and those stories and that scale, that human scale of the project could begin to come together. It was inspired in a lot of ways by its actual location on the riverbank as well, and the history of industry and technology was born there along the riverfront. So those sketches evolved and developed. And this idea of scale became a very, very important part of our conversation. We did not want the building to be very vertical. We wanted the building to feel horizontal, to feel planar, and to feel of human scale. So almost all the decisions that we made related to the exterior had to do with bringing that scale down to feel more approachable, to feel more welcoming, and to feel more civic and less ostentatious like many NFL stadiums often are. So the sketches developed, we wanted it to be fun and playful as well. We looked at all kinds of different ways to get that joy into the project. So it needed and wanted to be a lot of different things. And eventually we landed on a project that I'm quite proud of, and I know that others are excited about it as well. So the way we think about it is actually the people's house. It's not just a stadium. It's really a civic home. It's an asset for the community. And we wanted, I'll walk you through how we brought some of those aspects to life as well. So the first one is this idea of a community center, and I like thinking about this part of the project as a building within a building. You can see almost the way the stadium project welcomes and almost embraces this entrance that faces downtown Nashville, and this is the community center. This is the front door of the building that's open every day of the year, whether there's a game there or not, and there's 12,000 square feet of community space that's available for the people of the city and the neighborhood. So this idea of a building within a building, and this the way the building can embrace that. The second idea is this idea of wraparound porches. So no other stadium does this in the world. There's really no other project that celebrates the exterior terraces and balconies as much as this stadium does, and it's because of its incredible proximity to downtown Nashville. We wanted the city of Nashville to be the backdrop and to be a part of the experience of this stadium. And one of the ways we did that was we created these incredible wraparound porches that even on a game day, they can open up to the concourse areas and allow for this incredible indoor-outdoor experience. But on non-game days, they can also be used for community events and community interaction. This is a great shot from that terrace, looking back towards downtown. You can get an idea of what an incredible vista that would be. And it's, again, 360, 270 degrees view of the whole skyline. So let's peek inside real quick. I call this the largest room in Nashville. This is what happens when you put 60,000 people together in one room. It's awe-inspiring and incredible, and I just wanted to take the building here basically like an apple and cut it so you could get a peek inside and understand how that seating environment really relates and sits within some of the renderings that you'd seen today. Of course, it's a premier sporting venue, best in class. There's something for everybody in the seating bowl. We spent a lot of time thinking about the way to elevate the experience for every single person in the building, and I'll get to that here in a moment as well. But beyond just sports or just beyond football games, it's an incredible premier concert venue as well. So we've spent a lot of time thinking about acoustics, thinking about the kinds of shows that you can bring in. And what I would say here is that because the building is indoor, it affords the opportunity for a lot more event programming. So most outdoor football stadiums can only host concerts in the off season because destroying the field is detrimental to and impossible basically during the season. But with the indoor building that's not subject to environmental or weather concerns, and then the artificial turf, it can really host a wider variety of concert and non-sporting events year round, which is really exciting for the building and for the city. A couple different event configurations there. And now I've cut the building in the other direction, so you can see the sidelines of the building here in downtown in the background. And here I'm going to talk about just one comparison. I might hit a couple others as well, but one main comparison of how the stadium, the new stadium design is, let's say, improved upon the existing one. So in this diagram, you'll see the blue line here is the section line or the rake of the seating angle of the existing Nissan Stadium at the 50-yard line. And the green is the new stadium. So what I want you to notice is that every seat has been pulled further forward and slightly steeper. That means that your views are closer and better to the game or to the concert than they are in the existing building. In fact, the entire upper deck is pulled about 30 feet closer and about 30 feet lower. So that means that every single person in the upper deck has a view that's about 30 feet closer and 30 foot lower to the field, which makes for an incredible atmosphere in the bowl and a better viewing experience as well. There's a few other points I could touch on here. Obviously, the indoor ability allows you to host not just concerts year-round, but also Super Bowl events. The durability of the building is much stronger, let's say. Because it's an indoor building, the concrete and the building materials are protected from the weather, as opposed to raw concrete that sits out in the weather day in and day out. Those buildings do age much more quickly, and it's only because they're not protected in the same way that an indoor building is. There's flexibility that we've designed into the building for future-proofing, and so there's a lot of different ways that the building is more enhanced than the existing building. The new building is more efficient and advanced than the existing building. So I think with that, I'm probably out of time, and I should pass the mic. Looking forward to any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Manica. Questions, council members? Oh, we got all questioned out the other day. All right, Council Member Evans.
Does design include number of seats? Is that an appropriate question?
Sure.
Okay. I just was curious because of the whole conversation related to the potential future of a beautiful design stadium like this, having a reduced number of seats. And can you speak to why that design choice was made as part of, what's been put forward to the public?
Absolutely. It's industry best thinking at this point. Leagues and industry professionals have really encouraged thinking differently than you would have 20, 30, 40 years ago, which was 20, 30, 40 years ago, it was let's pick an arbitrary quantity and let's build to that quantity. And, the term nosebleed seat is not a positive term, right? So the approach that's a best of class approach at this point is to not build to an arbitrary quantity, but to build the right number of experiences where there's not a bad experience in the house. So the challenge that we gave to Manica was to find 60,000 great experiences. And as you can see, just even in that upper bowl, there's not a bad experience in the house. And so it was a matter of, rather than choosing some sort of arbitrary quantity, just choosing the right number of experiences. And this is a question that we get a lot. Back to that old thinking, it used to be that the NFL would only deliver Super Bowl events to venues with a certain quantity. 70,000 was a number that they used for a long time. That, again, is old thinking, because for their events, they want the same thing. They're not trying to get an arbitrary number of fans into a building that aren't all good experiences. The NFL was a big part of the design of this building and is very proud of it. And I have every expectation that their biggest events, including the Super Bowl, would eventually come to Nashville in this building.
Thanks. Councilmember Portfield, then Hurt, and then Johnston. Go ahead, Councilmember Porterfield.
Thank you, Chair. That was actually my question for the purpose of the viewing audience. One of the questions that I've got from multiple people are concerns about if it's enough seats to accommodate a Super Bowl based on what you said, the old thinking that there had to be a certain amount of seats. So thank you for saying that publicly.
Councilmember Hurt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my question is about the NFL and what their requirements are or what they may be, because I know when the NFL draft came that a lot of accommodations had to be made. And I'm wondering if we do bring a Super Bowl, or when we do bring the Super Bowl, are there allowances already made to fulfill the possible accommodations that the NFL would want, and what kind of cost would that be?
So we're currently working with the NFL to be sure that, because the Super Bowl is the biggest and best event, and so if you hit the Super Bowl mark, you're gonna hit everything else. So far, so good. They believe that everything in David's design would accommodate a Super Bowl, and it's not necessarily things that we would pay attention to. I wouldn't have even paid attention to it working in the industry. It's usually things behind the walls. It's the width of the service level, the basement, and having the right amount of tunnels to get all of their apparatus out and to have staging areas. Something that, frankly, our current stadium, which is only just a horseshoe and not a complete circle, would have a hard time accommodating. And so far, they absolutely are pleased with the design, and it would accommodate it without any additional cost. It's things that would just be just kind of normal day-to-day design elements that it would work for the Super Bowl.
Would that be the same for? Would that be the same for any press? Because I know that the press during that time would be extreme, other than just a regular Sunday night game.
Sorry. They fought hard, though, didn't they, last Sunday? Yes, the press box would accommodate a Super Bowl. There is a let me back up a little bit. So the NFL draft team, there's an NFL events team, and our organization got to know them very well. I count several of them as good friends. At this point, we spent so much time together working on that event, and so we at every point have been talking to them about this. It's the same group that does the Super Bowl and the NFL Combine, which is another event that would be open to a venue like this that's enclosed. And this venue, again, they're really, really impressed with. I don't, it's like choosing your favorite child. I don't think that they would necessarily just, call it their favorite publicly, but they love this building and the thought that's gone into it and the character that it has, and it meets all their needs for their biggest events.
Mr. Nihill, I understand that Councilmember Hurd is willing to play wide receiver.
We have tryouts every Tuesday.
And Sunday night, I need to be on the defensive team, okay? Linebacker.
All right, Councilmember Johnson. There you go.
That was awesome. You're definitely a defensive player. Thank you for being here, and it's a beautiful design, and I appreciate us being able to address the 70,000 if you Google Super Bowl, whatever, and it comes up. So that's been, several constituents have reached out and said, why are we going to build this if we can't even have a Super Bowl? So I appreciate you addressing that. And I know that there's actually a letter from Roger Goodell that sort of addresses that specifically. So I don't know if you want to share that later on. But I want to sort of get into the nuts and bolts of it. And I don't know if this is a question for you or if we've even gotten to that. But I know that right now you guys have parking for 1,500 spots, I think, roughly, or if not exactly 1,500 spots, I don't know, for players, staff, things like that. And I don't think that requirement is part of the $2.1 billion and part of the 15-acre development. So my question is, when you're designing this building, do we have any sort of structural or geographical studies to be able to put that parking underneath the building? And has that been discussed? Because I would love to address that. I mean, parking is part of this term sheet that bothers me, and I've made that, I think, pretty clear. So I'm just wondering if we can address that in the building, in the construction of the building then.
Great question. So the answer is we've done core boring studies to understand what it would mean to dig deep. And look, there's going to be a loading dock that goes down to that level. And so if you just expanded that level more, there would be an opportunity to have some parking or perhaps all internal parking there. There's also some above the surface options that are very affordable. And the decision was made that given that we are giving the land back to the city for whatever purposes, but there's obviously an East Bank Vision Plan that has development on all of that property. That there really should be a conversation that is complete and comprehensive. It's been our understanding that the city will ultimately hire a developer to come in and make the vision plan real in terms of what could be built, what should be built, to think through the logistics. And we have had conversations with people that we know in the development industry, and there are likely ways to be combining the needs that we would have for parking with parking that they would be building anyway for those developments in a way that perhaps doesn't have any additional cost at all. So bottom line is, while this building was built with just the area that we understand would be under the term sheet, really under our control, kind of the drip line of the building, if you will. Beyond that, it felt like there needed to be a conversation with everyone who would be involved, the thought thought leaders, the visionaries who'd be involved across the city, the team, and any developer who'd be working on the project. And at that point, just make that one of the conversation pieces, and it could go in a number of different directions. But again, I mean, there's a baseline, very basic garage that could be built on one of those spaces for a number that would be within the margin of error of the budget. It frankly could be absorbed into the budget. But that might not be the right thing for the development. That might not be what the city ultimately wants. And it may be that we work together to find a way to put it underground or to share a parking solution with a developer who's using that for some other purpose anyway.
I think sharing that aspect, what you're saying, with the 2,000 parking spots, which is to me separate from the 1,500 that you all need for staff and players and all that sort of stuff. I think regardless, it should be part of the design of the building, because let's say in 20 years the Titans go away, we still do, to your point, have that building, but that building is always going to be an event space. It's massive. So it's going to require a certain amount of parking for whatever staff would be there, whatever part of that. So I just think that, we can have the discussion about the 2,000 parking spots additional for visitors that are coming to patronize whatever event is going there in that building. But I think that the parking necessary to operate the building or to put on the event needs to be a part of that building and a part of the budget initially. And so whatever studies have been done as far as boring and all of that, I'm sure there's a lot that goes into it. You're sort of close to the river. I know the Pinnacle building is, I think, closer to the river than what the Titan Stadium would be, and they go down quite far. So I believe it's possible, but I definitely want that to be a part of the conversation, because I think it's so related to the building and the operation of the building, it should be part of the building.
It is absolutely possible, at least from the initial studies. One of the things, so David touched on this a bit, one of the challenges that he had was to design a building that would be flexible in two different environments. If as part of the term sheet, we're ripping up the lease for the land for other than the strip line and giving it back to the city, it could be parking lots for 30 years, and this had to be a building that would work in that environment and would stand alone and be, a great city asset that could be seen from across the river and something that would make people proud. But it also, we understand that the vision is that it's not the case, that there is this neighborhood that is built around it, and there aren't a lot of buildings like this that have as many people that come through it that are in that neighborhood setting, and there definitely needs to be harmony between the building and the reality and the logistics of the building with a neighborhood that would be built around it, and that parking is one of those pieces. And so if it means sinking the parking in underground, because the flow of ingress and egress of those cars end up being the right solution, once the city's developer decides ultimately what needs to be in that space and it's not interfering with that, maybe that is the solution. But rather than getting outside of that drip line and deciding exactly how it works, it felt like the right thing to do was to get the vision caster from a development perspective and the experience to the table to line up on what the best solution would be. But there are, we've probably debated 15 different solutions that we think are all perfectly workable for the building operations that would also seem to work well with the development, including sinking the parking.
Anything else, Councilmember? All right, thanks. Councilmember Hurt? Number 88 in your program?
I told you I was defensive.
All right,
53, I think. Yeah,
53.
88 is more like a tight end number. But anyway, I love structures. And you were talking about Michelangelo and the building coming from within, his sculptures, and you have to do it from within. And I'm originally from Memphis, and one of my favorite buildings in Memphis is the airport. And this, in some ways, kind of remind me of it because of the rectangular way and how it's stacked a little bit. And it also reminds me of a building that Meharry had. And because of the stacking, and they didn't really get it the way it needed to be in I guess, the settling and shifting, the bottom wasn't really strong enough to really handle the top. Now, this is kind of like a frame because of the opening in the middle, so I imagine it wouldn't be quite as heavy. So I said all of that is to say, what's your favorite part of the building, and do you have anything that you're concerned about that you want to make sure you keep an eye on as the building ages?
All right, well, I certainly appreciate that. I'm happy to have the chance to get to talk about my favorite parts of the building. I have three of them, really. First of all, one of three is I love the fact that it doesn't necessarily look exactly like every other stadium. It doesn't look like a stadium. It looks like a home. It looks like a part of a city, as opposed to an object that sort of, sits on a table and screams, something else. So I love the fact that it is unique in that respect. The second thing I love are the front porches. I told you that that's never been done before, and I think that that's an incredible opportunity for this building to shine and to change the way people think about going to a stadium and what a stadium experience is. And the third thing is the roof. I don't know, we didn't talk about it that much, but the sort of beautiful ETFU roof that sits like a circle right above the whole seating environment. It's a really light, incredible, delicate structure. It is light to the point that you said. It's very light, and that's also what helps keep it cost conscious. And I think that that's going to be, one of the hallmark signature design elements of the project.
Well, speaking about hallmark designs, if you studied our downtown, then you know that there is some indication of music. Is there anything in this building that signifies this being Music City?
Yeah, absolutely. We talked a little bit about how the building can accommodate premier concert venues. One of the other things, and that also relates to acoustics, so we spent a lot of time on this building already thinking about how acoustics can be supported for premier concert events. One of the things that we're doing here that we probably wouldn't do in any other project is we have a second stage that's built permanently into the seating environment. That's a unique thing for Nashville. That'll be a unique thing that I think will sort of support the spirit of Music City.
Well, I'm actually really talking about the design like our Country Music Hall of Fame looks like piano keys. Then you've got the Music City Center convention at the top of it is a guitar. And then you've got the Bridgestone that looks like a French horn. So, I don't know what the roof looks like. I saw it was kind of oval a little bit, and I don't know if you can put some little shakers on it and make it look like a tambourine or,
There were a number of things that, I don't know how long we worked on this, probably 4 or 5 months, that just kind of came to be like they were meant to be this way. Maybe it was like releasing, Michelangelo releasing the drawing. If you look at the building from a bird's eye view, it looks like a record player, with a record sitting on top of the record player in a way that feels incredibly appropriate for Music City to, those blimp shots, to have this record player look to it.
Council Member Porterfield.
Thank you, Chair. And with the scope of the building, like labor and building, would that be under the purview of today's conversation?
Go ahead and ask the question, and then we'll find out whether these guys know the answer.
Okay, thank you. My question is related to the actual labor and building. As we know in Nashville, we see a lot of wage theft with, you have the contractor, then you have a subcontractor and a subcontractor. And unfortunately, what we've seen is it has ended in wage theft. There was an incident with the building of a hotel downtown where a 16-year-old young man fell to his death because he was there were not appropriate restraints and things of that nature. So my question is with regards to safety protocols. Are the people working on the site going to be OSHA 10 certified? Are you all working with union contracted labor? Are you all making an attempt to work with minority-owned contractors, women-owned contractors, black and brown contractors? So if you can speak to that, the safety standards, your attempts to make sure that you are being equitable in choosing the companies that you work with, and how you're going to protect the employees from wage theft, if you could speak to all of those.
Yes, very, very kind of high-level summary is, I think the answer to all of those questions is, it's yes, we are, as part of our One Community platform, we're working with Don Harden Group to build a program around workforce, DBE hiring, wage theft prevention, competitive bidding process, all of the above. And it'll be a robust program. It's one that we're asking Don to report back to the Sports Authority on a regular basis, to publish publicly on a website at some point. And it's absolutely part of our One Community platform.
Councilmember Cash, did you have your hand raised? And then Councilmember Hurd again after that. Go ahead, Mr. Cash.
Thank you. I kind of want to reach back into some of the questions about parking, and if this is not a question you can answer, it's just something I want you to think about. And my stepfather has been going to Titans games for like 25 years. Doesn't miss a game, won't miss it. But he's at this point, he's getting up there in years and isn't as spry as he used to be. So I kind of want to ask about parking as it relates to, like, I hear that we're not sure yet about where some of the parking's going to go. But I guess I'm wondering about handicap parking. I think as it is now, there are the different parking zones, and there are handicap spaces within those zones, but those zones aren't always the closest to the stadium or the closest to the entrance. So I guess I'm curious, like, what requirements are there for there to be handicap parking close to the stadium, and just hope and also ask that as you continue planning, especially about parking, that you keep that in mind, that you got some loyal fans that aren't as mobile as they used to be, and still want to go to those games but want to be safe about getting in and out and stuff like that. Thanks.
I appreciate the feedback and the food for thought. I think the reality is, far too early to tell you exactly where your father-in-law would be able to park or get to the game. But one of the beautiful things about having this step back opportunity is, you just mentioned it's not a terrific experience today in terms of where he's able to park and how he can get into the game, and this is requiring us to have something of a paradigm shift. There's a lot of parking spaces today that are not going to be available for Titans games or for other events, but we genuinely believe that there's a way to take that paradigm shift and actually make it a better experience, both for people attending games and also for the people around in East Nashville and other neighborhoods, and people on the highways around there, because 7,400 people coming to the same place at the same time, it's not a great experience when you come in about the same time and leave it about the same time. And so we think that there's ways to reimagine and ask questions differently. It's not about where to park, but it's about how do you get to the game. And there will be some people who park. There needs to be that element of it. But we believe that shuttle services could play a great role. Las Vegas, their stadium was ranked as the #1 fan experience in the NFL last year, and one of the top 2 or 3 most celebrated experiences they had was a shuttle service where people got on, sometimes relatively close to the stadium, sometimes farther away around the region, and got dropped off right at the front door. There was a dedicated lane that let those shuttles get in and out easily and get dropped off at the front door. That's actually a great experience, and that's something that your father-in-law could, for example, take advantage of and make it very easy for him to get in and out. So we don't have all those answers yet, still early thinking, but we actually believe that in a strange twist of the way that we've been thinking about this, that we could actually improve the experience for everyone by being forced to rethink how people get to and from the game.
Gotcha. Thank you. And I guess part of my question is, I know when I was hearing about, I think it was at the Planning Commission hearing about the parking minimums bill or elimination of parking minimums bill, that that the staff person was asked something about handicap parking and relayed that that's in a different part of the code. This isn't affected by that. So are there, I'm not asking for numbers, but are there certain requirements for a building of this size that you include handicap spaces at an easily accessible space?
Yes is the answer.
All right, I've got Councilmember Hurt and then Johnston. Go ahead, Councilmember Hurt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councilman Porterfield made me think of something with her question about labor, because we ran a workforce development program for the new convention center, and on that construction, we did have OSIP, the Owner Control Insurance Program, and I was just wondering if this is something that you all would do here. And on other several metro projects we've had that, have we not? I think it was the Titan Stadium before, and the new convention center, and right.
Yes, we are definitely exploring that. We see the benefits of it, and we know that affords smaller contractors to actually bid on the work.
Exactly.
They will have the coverage.
And it saves money for Metro, as a matter of fact.
Yes,
yeah.
We're definitely going to do that.
Okay, and the other thing that and I love the Titans, but I also loved my beloved Tennessee State Tigers. So can you talk about how this is really going to be a great experience for the alumni of Tennessee State when they come to the stadium?
Absolutely. So we've committed to Tennessee State University that they would have the same rights that they have today in Nissan Stadium to play their home games in a new stadium. The technology in the new stadium, we believe, will make it feel much more like a Tennessee State home field environment. Unlike today, where there's just a lot of static signage and a lot of Titans branding throughout the building, because that's how buildings were built 25, 30 years ago. Buildings today, first-class facilities today, are very, very heavy on LED as signage and activation. And so we have also talked to them about partnering with our creative team and our production team to create TSU Tiger game day experiences where alumni could come into that building and it would just be, Tennessee State blue, and just in a way that's not quite that case today, right? And there's a dedicated locker room for Tennessee State University within that building. We've talked to Eddie George and Mickey Allen about when they bring recruits through. If they want to bring recruits through, we can do the same thing, kind of fire it up for the TSU Tigers. So when the recruits are coming through, it feels a bit more like, it's Tennessee's home field, or at least one of their home field for Tennessee State.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Johnston.
Thanks. I thought I was done, but I'm not. So when I look at Exhibit 1 of the term sheet, it defines the stadium project scope, and there are 9 bullet points. There are 6 of those bullet points I'm not worried about: seating capacity, suite, box seats, club seats, food and beverage, and the meeting and banquet space. I want to ask a question about the retail club store. Is in this design the retail club store a part of this building, or are you wanting a separate building for that?
We don't want a separate building for that. You can see, this is actually a perfect angle for it. I don't think anybody knows where the retail store would be specifically, but the grading of the site requires those stairs that you see to the left, and the current design would have this flat spot there that creates a great spot on top for as people are crowding at the gates to spread out, and that also for just it feels like it's a beautiful look to have a building underneath there. So it could be that that's where a retail team store would be, is in that spot, but that would still be kind of part of that stadium drip line. That's all necessary for grading, that would be a part of the stadium, and it's just making good use of that space. It also could be that the team store, just like in today's Nissan Stadium, is tucked back in the building itself. It's too early to say exactly where that would go.
But part of the scope and part of the $2.1 billion budget?
Yes.
Okay. And then we've talked about on-site parking. When it says on-site parking, is that what we're talking about, is the player parking and all that?
Yes. And you used 1,500 before. I don't think
It's
that's
1,000, I was told.
And I think that's not even necessarily a scientific number. But it's making sure that use is always available.
Okay, and I just want to make sure that it's on the record that this on-site parking requirement for the team, for staff, for whatever, of 1,000 or whatever arbitrary number that you come up with, I'm sure you'll come up with a very specific number, that it's part of this 15-acre development, it's part of the $2.1 billion budget, and it's not going to be something that extra, oh gosh, now we have to provide this other parking garage for this, that, and the other. The other question I have is about administrative office spaces. Obviously, your administrative office spaces right now are out in Metro Center. I think you're going to be keeping that space at least for part of you guys' operations, but with the administrative office spaces, are you going to have a space in this building, or is that going to be also something that you're expecting in part of the 130-acre development?
No, so our main headquarters today, you're right, our practice facility, our training facility, and most of our staff is out at Metro Center, but the current Nissan Stadium has administrative offices as well for the people who run the stadium, the operations team, there's a ticket office and all of that, and so that's just replacing that. It's inside the stadium, it's absolutely part of the budget. In terms of your first question, I think the reality is, again, we're waiting to have this other party at the table to understand kind of how to best nestle that parking into the development. We think that there's a solution that's available that is, again, a rounding error. It could be within that number. It's just a matter of like whether the real estate is going to be used by the city and the developer to build something else there. And if that's the case, then we need to figure out, okay, then where does this parking go and how does it ultimately fit in? So that's a bit more TBD. And it just, again, requires this additional thinking to be at the table.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Council Member Porterfield? Do you still have a question?
I forgot my question, Chair. Oh, I remember now. Thank you. It was going back to the question about seating capacity. Now, what is the average amount of seats that are occupied for the games?
Kind of depends on the team. It's about in that range. Sometimes it's higher, sometimes it's lower in terms of actual people in the building. One thing that I think is really important to talk about too is David flipped through the slides pretty quickly, but part of the design and thinking Music City, thinking about attracting concerts and promotional events, there is, I don't think we've quantified the number on the nose, but this slide here, there's a possibility that there's actually a higher capacity for concerts in this facility than in the current Nissan Stadium because of some clever design principles where the way to look at it is about the 25-yard line is where you set up the stage today. So every seat behind that is not available as a seat for the games, and then just the space on the field from the 25 to the back of the building is what's available for the floor seats. This one allows a stage to be built all the way beyond the end zone, which leaves the entire floor of the entire field available, plus pushes back that killed seat note. So while we haven't done the math, by the eye test, it looks like there's actually more capacity available for concerts.
I'm thinking actual game. So pardon my ignorance, I know nothing about sports. Do the Titans typically sell out their games now? Because if this stadium has a better viewing experience but fewer seats, if they're selling out games, then you may not have enough seats. So that's more the line of questioning that I was wondering.
It's a little bit of a painful experience because it's my job to make sure that we sell out the stadium. We don't sell out the stadium for most of our games.
Oh, okay. Thank you. And then I just wanted to follow up on the question that I asked previously, and thank you for sharing that. I know you mentioned that the Hardin Group would be doing a lot of the work that was mentioned, and I just want to make sure that is something that is a concern that has come up from people in the community, and just making sure that is making sure that is something that is prioritized and not putting the burden on like one entity to make sure that all of those things are happening, making sure that you all are prioritizing and making sure that this is happening. So
This man right here holds a Titans business card. He's our internal construction manager, and part of what he's charged to do is make sure that, we're not outsourcing any of this process, that we've got somebody internally who's worked construction projects and understands how these work, the process, the flow. And we are, let me say this, we're passionate about this piece. We understand the opportunity that a project like this would afford this community, and that if we put the right amount of thinking behind this is the type of construction project and that will, yes, provide jobs and local jobs and jobs to disadvantaged businesses, but we also think that it can go far beyond that. A lot of the other things we have in our One Community platform are providing opportunities for people who might not actually be ready for those jobs because they're still students, or the particular work, they're not qualified to do that work quite yet. How can we, by using the right amount of thought and just caring about this, provide opportunities for students to come in apprenticeship on this project? How can we provide an opportunity to not just tell that potential vendor that's not quite qualified to do this work, sorry, how can we bring them along so that the next time that there's a project like that, they are ready, they are qualified? And so there is, in addition to Don Harden, we're asking the Urban League to come in and grade papers and hold us accountable to all of these standards as well. But this is something that I promise you, we recognize for the opportunity that it is for this community, and we're committed to going far beyond what is just kind of an acceptable level. We want to do great things with this project for the community.
Anything else, Councilmember? All right, I've got Councilmember Hurt and then Cash again. Go ahead, Councilmember Hurt.
So my sorority used to, and I don't know when it stopped or why, but we would handle concessions in some of those areas, and we would do it as volunteers. But then the Titans will actually give, or the concessionaire would actually give a donation to the sorority for us to be able to use. Is there any way that possibility could come back, because that does help, and we use the funds for scholarships, and then it gives people an opportunity to have that type of experience that they ordinarily may not have.
We are still doing that currently in Nissan Stadium. So this Sunday against the Denver Broncos, there will be nonprofit organizations that are helping to serve concessions and ultimately receiving a donation to their nonprofit. And it's an important program, and it's absolutely something that will continue into a new building.
Okay, so who do we need to contact for that?
You can contact me.
Councilmember Cash.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate what Councilmember Porterfield said, and I appreciate your answer, that we definitely want to make sure that these economic opportunities are available to, and that we seek out minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, local opportunities for local businesses, union labor. So I appreciate your attention to detail on that, and glad that there is somebody on the team that is looking out for those things. That's something that my constituents have asked about and care about as well. Thanks.
I would be remiss if I didn't point out the fact that I believe that ultimately operating this building will be one of the world's best women-owned businesses. Amy Adams-Strunk has been an absolute force in terms of what she's brought to our organization, and I think the community as well. And so for her, she's got a passion for this as well.
Thank you, Councilmember Cash. Any other questions for the team here? All right, right on time, because we're scheduled to go to the next segment at 6:30. Thanks a lot, all three of you, for coming today. Really appreciate it. Thank you. We'll have Planning Department next. And we'll swap out the presentations. Good. All right, looks like we're ready to go. We've got Planning Director Lucy Kempf joining us today. Thank you for being here, Lucy.
Councilman Mendez, thank you so much for inviting me here today to present an update on the Imagine East Bank vision. And I want to thank all of you for being here. I know your time is precious, and I'm grateful for your service and leadership within our community. So I've been to council several times to talk about the Imagine East Bank vision plan. So I'm going to just really provide a very quick background statement because I assume all of you are familiar with the project, but I'm happy to answer any questions about the background. This was one of the most complex sort of technically projects that we've pursued as a city, certainly as a planning department, but as a city in terms of the land area, the scope of the opportunities and challenges in this part of our city. Those include infrastructure deficiencies, really large scale existing interstates, the river, our resiliency goals, all of those created a technically complex environment. And we worked really hard to ensure that we were engaging the community, both neighborhoods around the East Bank, but also throughout the city who might be interested in our work. Without planning for the East Bank, without really getting in front of development and guiding it in a manner that supports smart growth principles, I think that we would be at risk of a very ad hoc development scenario. And we wanted to ensure that we were coordinating and directing development to support and manage growth not only in this area, but its impact on surrounding communities and neighborhoods, and ensuring that we're really bringing this area into a more productive space. And so we really felt that it was important to develop a comprehensive vision first. And I have to say, having just listened to the prior presentation, having both a vision for this area as well as a proposal for the stadium together and not trying to do one without the other is a real opportunity from a planning and design perspective. And so our visioning work began in February of 2021. Feels like a long time ago, Councilman, both members. And I do want to thank Councilman Parker and Withers for their great stewardship and partnership. They both spent an enormous amount of time with us to help guide the engagement, and also had constituencies who participated in informal and formal ways. And that's precious. The gift of time is precious. And so we worked through a number of technical planning phases, through workshops, visioning sessions with community members. We developed many concepts, had back and forth conversations, had large maps for people to draw on, which is probably our most favorite exercise, released draft plans, took feedback, and then on October 6th, I'm pleased to report that the vision was presented and adopted unanimously by the Planning Commission. And essentially what they adopted was an update to Nashville Next as part of our general plan. And so with this work, we just have much greater visibility into what some of the community needs are to ensure that we shape development in a way that is thoughtful and is beneficial for our city. Between August 22nd and September, I just wanted to highlight and acknowledge that the planning team here, who held 35 events in about 5 weeks to try to ensure that we were in the right place from a neighborhood planning perspective. I've given an asterisk. Some of you have asked really good questions about how to do good community engagement. Councilman Toombs, I heard that from you. And we we really want to deliver on that promise. And so the asterisks are the events that we held that were evening and weekend events. The planning department loves to host things, but what we have learned from a lot of neighbors is we want you to come to us. And so we tried to go to the farmers markets and to the McFerrin Park Neighborhood Association or whomever would have us there, and that seemed to be an effective way of trying to get at some of the topic areas that were of most interest to neighborhoods. And throughout that 18-month engagement process, we heard 4 primary planning goals and principles that were of interest. The first is safe and simple multimodal connections. If you've walked in and around the East Bank today, you know that it feels really uncomfortable. It is auto-oriented. The infrastructure is large in terms of the interstates, the bridges. It doesn't feel comfortable to move around in any other way. Even in an automobile, I would argue it feels uncomfortable. But you can't get north to south very easily. And we heard from lots of residents in East Nashville that this felt very much like a concrete moat, a big separation between them and the businesses downtown, for example, and other places. And so we wanted to understand, how can you get to the East Bank and how can you move through it in a way that is more diverse in terms of the modes, biking, walking, those kinds of things. The second, we heard really strongly that we want an East Bank that is affordable, that is open and that feels inviting, that is safe, that has a strong place for housing development and affordable housing. And so really what we're talking about from a land use planning perspective is a pretty radical transformation from parking lots, 100 and some odd acres of parking lots, surface parking lots, private industrial uses, into a much more dynamic place and mixed use neighborhood. And this needs to be a place that is welcoming for all. So we heard that loud and clear. And we know that that's something that must be preserved as we think about implementation. The third we heard was respect for the river. And this is something that seemed to mean different things to different people. I would say that there was a desire to create more physical access to and from the water, but also to ensure that we are planning with the highest resiliency standards available today, best practices for areas that are vulnerable to flooding. And how do we ensure that future people, future lives, future residents are protected as we rethink the development on the East Bank? And then last but not least, neighborhoods for Nashvillians, places that are, we heard, downtown doesn't have enough family-friendly places. Is the East Bank the kind of place where we could have civic and cultural investment, places where families would want to go? Mixed-use neighborhoods. And again, this I see as the principle that brings it all together, just wanting it to feel like this city and not like we've landed spaceships and so we spent a lot of time as we developed the plan thinking about how to create a sense of relationships to surrounding neighborhoods that exist today. And so this was the fourth principle. And so as you are hearing me go forward and talking a little bit about next steps, and when I talk about planning principles, we want to ensure that we are preserving as we look towards implementation. These are the 4 that we heard most consistently from community members who participated in our process from the planning and design side. There are other key principles on implementation around who is developing the properties, access, ensuring that we have, fairness and equity at the forefront. And I'm really pleased that Michelle Lane is here to speak on those key issues as part of procurement, but I don't want to get there yet. But these are the planning principles that we really focused on. So a vision plan is aspirational. It is a reflection of community priorities. It's meant to help us understand how to solve some of the most significant challenges within an area, and it is based on research and analysis of existing and future conditions. What it is not is detailed engineering or design plans, and it is not rezoning. That is your space. And so we presented a plan document that showed lots of images and ideas for how this area could evolve. And but what I would say is, if you see buildings or detailed open spaces, it's not our intention to show specific design that it must look exactly like this, but rather to capture an intention that we understand is desirable from a community planning perspective. There were two illustrative plans that we shared within the vision document in terms of focusing on the metro-owned land. The one on the left depicts the central waterfront area, which is generally the metro-owned land, with a new stadium moved directly to the east, and then an alternative which showed planning and design and development ideas around an option B, which would show leaving the stadium in place. So obviously, you know, you're deliberating right now on many different issues around the stadium, including operational, financial, and what have you. Our goal was to give a view of the planning and design factors that we think are part of the discussion. Obviously, this isn't the whole discussion, but there are some very real planning and design outcomes that are critical to thinking about the stadium placement and location. Those include significant civic spaces and park spaces and how those are organized. That includes the placement and the function of the mobility network, for example. And in all cases, our goal is to ensure that we are creating an integrated and thoughtful neighborhood with respect to the stadium, which is obviously an important civic and cultural entertainment use and sports facility within our city. Just quickly on the vision plan, our goal, like anything in Nashville Next, and most of you have had experiences working through rezonings with us, our hope is that the vision plan can guide land use policy decisions, inform mobility plans, help us think about future design tools, and also help capture some of the broader priorities that we heard and how to ensure that we're thinking holistically about planning in our city. If there's one thing I have heard from so many of you and many Nashvillians in my time in this role is plan more thoughtfully and strategically, bring it all together first. Don't try to claw back sidewalks after the building is already there. I mean, that seems like very basic, but you know, these are the conversations we have in Nashville, and we wanted to ensure that we did this well. I already mentioned that the Planning Commission adopted the vision on October the 6th. And so in the document, and this is all available online, I hope you will read it and digest. We had a next steps and implementation phase, and the very first recommendation was to set forth a clear process for the redevelopment of metro-owned land in a way that was consistent with that community feedback that we received. And so we have been, you know, really thinking about how to bring this conceptual vision to life and to assure that we are going to protect and promote the feedback that we got from the community, guidance from the members of this body. And so we are working towards, you know, a way of engaging both nonprofit and private partners to understand how to, again, take this auto-oriented parking lot, concrete parking lot area and transform it into something that supports the kind of uses that we understand would be desirable. And so if you look at this image with the stadium footprint moved to the east, you can see that what we are considering are potential development opportunities, particularly to the south of the stadium on the right, a large green and civic space in the center that connects to an outstanding system of greenways that really should be a platform for more regional mobility within this area along our greenway systems and pedestrian access to our river. And you'll see that we have begun to think about potential blocks for development where we've shown buildings. I wouldn't pay so much attention to the buildings, but that's just to suggest that in laying out streets that are multimodal and in laying out parks and green spaces, which was one of the most important comments we got from the community in trying to understand the general placement of the stadium, we've begun to lay out a blueprint for evolving this area into one that can support a mixture of uses where it couldn't today, as we don't have very many streets, for example. And so the area in blue is the approximate footprint of the current stadium. And so the area in white is the new stadium location that and proposal that you're reviewing today. And so as we started to think about, again, moving towards executing on the vision plan and understanding how to bring these ideas forward, we looked at the Metro-owned land. It's in the hatched area here in black. And we began to try to think about which of the blocks are most related to the stadium development and which are encumbered by the current location. And so the ones that are in red here and green generally reflect the resolution that you received, which delineates properties where we would like to better understand what a private master developer, how they would respond to our goals for our community goals, our vision plan, and the stadium and the like. And so that is the reason I'm really pleased that Michelle Lane, who is head of our procurement office, can help us understand how that through that process we can begin to effectuate the implementation of this project. The green property here we've included is one of the most important in my mind. It's a mobility hub, and it's an area where we've been working a lot with WeGo to better understand how we can support both local and regional mobility on the East Bank. Again, we don't want to see the East Bank in a silo. It has to participate in the fabric of our city, promote our goals around affordable housing, for example, and access to and through. And so we think that that's a really important early step that we would like to take as a city to ensure that we are promoting two of the most important community goals around mobility and housing. So I highlighted that in green to say that, you know, that is the one property that was really programmed in the plan and where we heard really strong feedback that that we need that placed here. There are other ideas for civic and cultural uses, which I'm happy to talk about, which I think could become part of the mix. But you know, at this point, I think our goal is to, we've laid out a vision with a lot of community objectives. We want to hear back now what a potential partner might recommend in terms of delivering on those. And so with that, thank you so much again for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions on the vision and all that good stuff. So thank you, Councilman.
No problem. I'm going to start with Councilman Parker. I know you've got questions about the RFQ process and how that fits in.
Yes. And so since this term began, there's been a lot of situations that have come up where, you know, we're asked to initiate some process, and then it's often said, oh, well, you'll get another look at it, you'll approve the contract, or you'll approve the thing down the road. But, you know, those things come to us as like an up or down. We don't really get much say in the procurement process. But given the, so it's my understanding, just like broad strokes, you're asking us to authorize you to put out an RFQ, which is a request for qualifications. And so hopefully a bunch of people would respond to that and say, here's why we're the folks you should talk with more about this, or however that works. And then there would eventually be a request for proposals. And then that would be actual proposals from folks. I guess I'm just wondering, like, how do we make sure that the things that, you know, affordable housing, transit, mobility, all the really great things that we have in this plan that maybe don't have the same level of advocates pushing for them, the same type of lobbyists that are pushing for those things, that are pushing for stadiums and tech campuses and whatnot. How do we make sure that those things actually get in the final thing that comes before us for approval?
So first, I want to give a shout out to this body, planning department, mayor's office, all for ensuring that we had a plan in place to guide our work. We often don't, and some cities don't. They'll sort of issue, you know, proposals to the development community without having received any feedback about what folks would prioritize. And so those 4 buckets where we heard the most feedback and principles, those are the planning and design objectives that we would bring to an RFQ, is meeting those standards. We've heard that we must have affordable housing, yes. Let me ask Michelle Lane if she wouldn't mind joining me. Oh, okay. I want to make sure that that the RFQ process is one that is specific and it's protective of our city to ensure that we're conducting everything fairly and transparently. So I want to make sure that she answers how we should approach, or how we would approach that.
Well, it's like before, it's on. Like every time it doesn't work, it's been the volume. This mic up here was carrying pretty well. Why don't you come up here? She's going to use this mic over here.
Because the volume's up, it should work now.
Thanks.
Okay, I think you were probably walking down the right track. What I was hearing Ms. Kemp say was that typically with a solicitation, an RFP, RFQ, whatever we're going to call it, competitive solicitation, it is based upon a business case and a risk analysis that has been conducted by the procuring department and based upon guidance that's been provided in terms of strategic direction, which I hear Ms. Kemp saying has been handed to her by this body. So we would then take that information along with specific criteria that we receive from the departments, and we would include that in a solicitation. I'll just say for the record, we put out for all of our departments. I feel like I'm sitting on the floor. We put out for all of our departments very specifically that our strategic objectives are to provide superior procurement services that are aligned with the priorities that have been established by the administration and our governing body. So we're looking toward the department to advise us and guide us based upon information that they've received to ensure that solicitations are reflective of such. And I will say, too, we don't issue any solicitations out of procurement that don't have the approval and the authorization of the requisitioning department. So they would have an opportunity to review it and ensure that they are satisfied with the details that are set forth in that solicitation, which should be guided by your instruction.
So we have a resolution before us authorizing this RFQ so will we have an opportunity to review the RFQ before it's issued?
No.
Why is that?
It is inconsistent with government procurement best practice. It really compromises what we call the cone of silence. And quite frankly, it puts you as an elected official in a very precarious situation in terms of having insight on a solicitation that is set to hit the street. You've got all the details and the answers to the test. I think that the way that we have operated related to solicitations in government is that you provide that guidance, you say what needs to be there, and then the folks that you've identified and instructed to do so should ensure that they're following that direction.
I understand as a matter of best principle, best practice. One way around that would be to just publish it for everyone to see. And not have, council members have some kind of access that the public doesn't have. But I do think that this is maybe a case where we might want to have council have the opportunity to have another look at it before it's sent out.
Well, and if I can just try to bridge some gaps here. Like one of the things you said, Ms. Lane, is that we've given direction to planning about what should be in it, and we absolutely haven't. The plan that was just presented has been adopted by the Planning Commission, not by the council. We haven't been asked to adopt it one way or the other, and so I think that's part of what Councilmember Parker is asking about is so far the guidance that's driving the RFQ is from the planning, and there's been a ton of work, lots of community involvement. I think we understand that, but there hasn't been a direction from us, and I think that's what Councilman Parker's addressing.
So if I may, Director Lane's got a wide platform with which she's got to implement and execute on behalf of Metro, including all kinds of legal standards. On the planning and design side, if there are comments that you have, I'm going to go back to this slide, and all of the recommendations that we have in the East Bank plan that you think we haven't captured here, then give me that feedback on the planning and design side. And my ears are open. I'm happy to, as the department that is requesting that we take this step to hear from a potential private partner the best way to deliver on these objectives, then tell me what those are, and I will ensure that those are included as planning principles in how we approach the work. The housing itself had recommendations for phase one, and we're directing, I would presume that we would direct the folks who are still, responding to the RFQ to look to the plan guidance that includes recommendations for infrastructure that's needed. And so all of that is to say, I want to reassure you that my goal is to use the vision that has been vetted as the guidance we have for what to pursue in the RFQ. But like I said, if there's something not here, then I'm all ears on the planning and design side.
Or I guess I'm still just having a little bit of, I'm not really understanding why the body would not have the opportunity to review before solicitations go out. Again, I understand we don't want to have privileged access to that kind of thing, but I think if you just made it public through the drafting process, that would sort of get rid of any of those risks of us having, privileged information about a solicitation.
Are you saying, it does become public once we issue
I'm asking for this body to have the opportunity to review it before you issue it.
I don't think that that's in Metro's best interest to make it open to the public body, because then, of course, it becomes open to all the vendors and all the public. So the requirements would be published prior to their publication, basically.
I guess I just don't, we're going to publish it anyway, right?
And we have a start date, and there are a number of date triggers that are included in our procurement code and in our regulations that are based upon the issuance of a solicitation. And so if we make it public prior to that, then we really run into a bunch of issues in terms of vendor remedies for, administrative remedies, any kind of rights that they may have. Could I suggest that we publish the solicitation? It becomes available to you to review. And if there are any issues that you have with it, we have the opportunity to amend the solicitation and make any of those changes. And we would do that, of course, based upon guidance from the procuring department.
What would the process be for this body to initiate an amendment to an active solicitation?
Well, the amendment would need to come through the requisitioning department. So again, I think for a body like this, the challenge for you is to identify what the issues are, what concerns and priorities, I should say, that you have, and then express those to the requisitioning procuring department. And then they would advise us how to craft the solicitation and make any changes to it pursuant thereto.
Let me make a suggestion. Maybe everybody will hate it. But following up on what Ms. Lane said about if this body gives direction to the department, then the department will have to build it into the process. Director Kempf has suggested one path to give direction through the design process, and then alternatively, just to make up a silly example that's ridiculous, but if we wanted, if there were a majority of members of the council that said, in addition to the things on this page, we want the RFP to include designs for spaceport, and we put that in the resolution, then we would have told them what to happen, and they would do it, is what I'm hearing. Obviously, that's ridiculous, but just to illustrate the point.
You mean the resolution that's before us that we deferred, or a future other resolution?
If we have anybody's welcome to tell me I'm nuts about this, but if we have a resolution that says, go forth and issue an RFQ to find a development partner, and we want to add a line that says, be sure to add the 4 things listed on page 6 of Director Kemp's slide, and thing number 5 that wasn't on the slide, and a majority of us want that, and that gets into the resolution, then then that's what they'll do as far as pursuing the RFQ process, is what I'm hearing. I think Director Kempf would probably argue that those 4 things cover it, and that's what their plan is. But if the resolution right now doesn't say, be sure to add the 4 things listed on page whatever, and if we wanted to double down on that, I bet we could have an amendment that says, be sure the RFQ includes those categories.
Sure. Okay, I will let other folks ask questions at this point, unless Dr. Kempf, did you want to respond to something?
No, I would just say our goal is to initiate the process. The first step is finding qualified private entities that have experience in these areas. And this is a technically complex site. And so you really want to ensure that we identify candidates who would know how to deliver infrastructure, for example, at this scale. And so what I would say to Councilman Mendez's suggestion is I'm here. All of you can reach me I'm happy to figure out the right way to talk about the planning and design factors that you think we should weigh. We have endeavored to capture what we heard during those 18 months of community work. And so I think if there are other factors you think should be weighed, we can do that. I think ideally you create a process where we're able to evaluate several different proposals and weigh them. That's the end goal. And so I try, the more successful procurements I've worked on have created room for creative ideas and innovation in what's submitted. And so we have tried not to, I have found that more prescriptive I am on certain aspects, sometimes that can limit responses. And I think we're looking for innovation as a city. That's the only thing I would add on the planning side.
Okay, well, thanks. I guess that's it for now. Thank y'all.
Thanks. Councilmember Hurt, then Withers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I really feel what Councilmember Parker is trying to get to, and I would hope that the Equal Business Opportunity Program is going to address some of those things, if not all of them. That was the whole purpose of doing it, because of the results of the disparity studies that we've had, not just the last one, but over years, where we've seen the disparities when it comes to minority and women-owned businesses and so forth and so on. And personally, I'm not very optimistic, and I'm a pessimist. I get really excited with the opportunities that are put forth. But I just wanted to remind, and I know that we're not talking about the stadium right now, but those minority businesses that were a part of the stadium project are no longer in business. And oftentimes those minority businesses underbid in order for them to get the contracts, because they do hear the stories or hear the sayings that you can't find minorities that meet the qualifications that you just spoke about. And I want to say that the messaging where all of this is, it sounds good, but the execution of it seems to be lacking in quite a few things historically. And if I look at the presentation that you brought, I didn't see much. I hear the messaging of inclusion, but I didn't see the real true engagement of the communities that are there now, but perhaps those that are coming and not those that just left. Because I think all of that has to be a part of it, and you looking at the development of the River Chase and all of the things that are surrounding it, it's just not what it was. And not that we really want it to be, but we definitely want there to be some equity and more intentional, true inclusion and engagement. Let me see. I think that the past meetings really did not reflect that diversity either. And that was one thing. And I remember going to a couple of meetings and I was asking about the Titans, because you talked about how it was a great thing for us to have the Titans presentation and now having yours, and how it all integrates and works together. And it's been separate for me from all the previous meetings that I've attended. There was no discussion about the Titans. And I think, just as you said, that should have been discussed simultaneously. The other thing I would like to say is that I definitely hope that all that we do in our procurement process reflects what Nashville looks like, and I know that's been a lot of the messaging and what this speaks to, but in the end, what happens is something totally different. So I'm just asking, and I know there aren't necessarily any assurances, so to speak, but I'm hoping that Equal Business Opportunity Program gives us the assurances that we seek. And I mean, you know, Michelle, you and I have gone back and forth with this probably for the last 15 years. And so you know exactly where I am and what I'm speaking to. Thank you.
Thanks. Go ahead.
Just to address the equal business opportunity portion of this, you know, this solicitation, like all that come to us for issuance and for receipt of offers, would include an effort to maximize participation of, you know, Black, brown, woman-owned small businesses in the execution of the contract. I want to distinguish that. I heard you say a couple of things, so I want to distinguish that from seeking, you know, inclusion in terms of the engagement on the plan itself. We would apply programming consistent with the charge that we've been given, you know, by council with the Equal Business Opportunity Program. And in some instances, we identify other methodologies to maximize diversity inclusion, but that would be applicable on the solicitation like any other.
Thank you. And I've got Councilman Withers and then Toombs. Go ahead, Councilman.
Thank you, Chair Mendez. For my own edification, I know Councilmember Parker referenced we do have legislation that we've deferred once about the RFQ solicitation. It will be coming back before us in a couple of days. And so I'm wondering if you can walk us through a couple of things. One is, this solicitation is for a request for qualifications. And I want to make sure that's right. And then what is that timeline from when that would be issued to when, what the next step is? And how does the RFQ relate to, I assume there's an RFP later. And I'm just wanting to understand that process, especially for myself as I'm coming to the end of my term. So I want to make sure what that runway is and what that process is. And then in addition to that RFQ and RFP or whatever next steps, what that phasing is, I wanted to see if Director Kempf could maybe speak a little bit more about how this East Bank plan is kind of broken up into phases. Is this RFQ for the entire package, or is it for different phases of the East Bank build out? And if so, how are those phases distinguished?
So I'll speak to your first question. What we anticipate, and this is something that we do often with these type of, you know, complex solicitations that are seeking to understand qualifications, and then seeking specific project-specific offers, we will issue a multi-phased solicitation in which we would be looking toward qualifications, and then our next, you know, phase, and we reserve the right to issue, you know, multiple phases such that, you know, based on what's most advantageous for Metro, that's the best way for me to put it, so that we can get to the best offer. And so a multi-phase solicitation here would be designed to identify that best partner that Ms. Kemp has already talked about. We would be, of course, looking toward things such as, you know, past experience or previous experience doing like work, understanding what kinds of specific financial capacity they've got, those kinds of things. Those are very common elements of multi-phase solicitations, in which the first round would be a calling process, basically, based on qualifications. I don't want to get into too much more detail, but it really does combine what you're talking about into one solicitation or into one procurement action.
Okay, and so what is the timeline for that? Assuming the council adopts this resolution next Tuesday.
We're ready to rock. I mean, it's been made very clear that this is an important solicitation. I mean, they all are, but this one is one that there are a number of other developments that hinge upon it. So we are, you know, prepared with a senior procurement officer ready to go with it as soon as this body says go. So our expectation is that, we'd have it on the street probably within a month. I don't anticipate that we would get offers in from it. This is November, probably until after the first of the year. You want to give offers significant time to be able to put together their best, I don't want to call it proposal, but it's kind of response to qualifications on that first round, and then we would go from there. But we are prepared to move it quickly. I anticipate somewhere between 90 days, probably to 120.
Okay, and then I guess just one last thing, and thank you so much, Chair, for indulging me, but while I'm not saying that I would advocate for this, but if the council were to consider an additional deferral of an additional meeting, maybe to sync up with some of the other legislation that we have, what would be the effect of that, maybe a one-meeting deferral?
Just the time frame, the amount of time. We have to anticipate the holidays at this point in the year, so it pushes everything out. But again, I've got an individual who's dedicated to this project, who's ready to move on this solicitation once we're authorized to do so.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks. Councilmember Toombs.
Thank you, Chair. Director Kemp, and this may be somewhere in the thick packet for Envision East Bank that we received, but I am concerned about impact on my district because, of course, going up Cowan Street, it turns to Vashti Baptist World Center, and there are lots of rumors swirling around amongst my constituents regarding how all of this development is going to impact them and if they're going to be run out of the neighborhood. And connectivity is an issue for my district as well, particularly in that area. So how does this Envision East Bank plan impact that part of the district? Then I have a second question as well.
Oh, I'm sorry. I lost. What do I need to do? This? Oh. There you go. Okay. So, incorporating smart growth principles into a multimodal look at how the East Bank needs to function within our much larger transportation plan that this body approved 2019 or 2020, forgive me. And so ensuring that this area is a platform to improve outcomes for neighborhoods like yours. Our goal is to give folks options to move around outside of the vehicle. Today, we heard from so many residents that they get on the interstate to go a fifth of a mile, which is rather insane and not the purpose of an interstate at all. It's unpleasant. And so I think, this area is a linchpin in a way for bringing together other options for people to move around and experience the city in a way that actually protects neighborhoods, because through the creation of a multimodal boulevard, which is shown here, does my mouse? No, it doesn't. Okay, that's the thick blue line north to south. And it will ensure that the development is organized along that north-south route and brings sort of the different modes through that infrastructure. And our goal, Councilwoman, is to extend from the boulevard to Cleveland and then up to Dickerson, which is identified in this city's transportation plan as a key area for future investment. And so we want to ensure that your residents are able to move around and have access to the neighborhoods and goods and services. And my hope is that our city can be a place of short distances. If you want to live near your place of business and your hobbies, or whatever that may be, that we can bring that access to you. It's very difficult to accomplish that today because of how choked off River North and East Bank are. And so that actually drives quite a bit of traffic and other issues to the to the neighborhoods around it because this area is so insulated and is driving, traffic to the interstate and the like. So mobility is an important platform. You and I have talked about how to ensure that other projects that are on the river and that are in your district are actually thoughtfully integrated into this plan. And I think NDOT's not here, but that's the intention with which they're sending feedback to some of those private entities that are interested in developing in your district. And so we want to make sure that this is sort of a cohesive community, and infrastructure delivery project, as opposed to sequencing, potting off, and siloing development, which very much tends to put pressure on existing neighborhoods.
So looking at this map, and it's hard when it doesn't drill down to all of the individual streets to read it, but if I'm looking at it correctly, it is coming all the way up to Baptist World Center. Is that right?
So the primary boulevard today really is focused on Boulevard to Cleveland to Dickerson.
Okay.
I think that there's an intention to ensure that if we're going to have bikeways, pedestrian ways, and other modes, that we can't ignore that. But the primary access is really focused on Dickerson. And then, of course, to the south, we're interested in understanding how to connect to Murfreesboro ultimately, which is a really important transit and mobility corridor in our city. And then the work of connecting to downtown is currently being studied through the Connect Downtown project. And so we're really trying to give a holistic network-oriented view. But the connection to Brick Church and Whites Creek is not the same section or the boulevard that we've been talking about. That's going elsewhere.
Okay. And could you provide me something that kind of drills down closer
to
street level so I can tell?
Maybe when we go on our tour.
On our tour?
I think that would be great.
Okay.
I would love to do that.
Okay, that makes sense. And also,
Councilmember, would you mind sending that question to Danielle Godin so everybody will have, because I think that's an important question for more than just your district.
Okay. And then my second question is in regard to American Baptist College, with it being right there on the river, so close to River North and all this development. Has there been any involvement or engagement with American Baptist College to see how they integrate with all of this change?
So there have been two planning sort of processes over here. One is the East Bank, and then the other was the Haynes Trinity plan. I want to go back and check my records on their involvement in the first more specifically. I do think that the college came to some of the charrette sessions. I'm getting nods from staff, but I'm happy to send you a note with more specific comments about their involvement. Again, what we've done so often in this city over the last many decades is had very siloed development that is interior facing. And when that is the development profile, it really drives traffic and impacts to surrounding areas. And so creating a more cohesive plan that protects community benefits on the forefront, like sidewalks or bikeways or greenways, whatever those are, is our objective here, and ensuring folks have access to bus service, for example. So we have every interest in the world if there's if that entity is interested in considering its own plans in ensuring that we're able to serve them as well.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Councilmember. Anybody else with questions? All right. Thanks very much to both of you for coming today. Really appreciate it. And I'll take a quick, it's already just about 7:30. Any council members want to bring up any other topics for discussion today? All right. Councilmember Evans, go ahead.
Thank you for recognizing me, even though I'm not on the committee. I actually have a question, and I don't know if it'll fall into one of your future meetings or not, but kind of getting into the East Bank and the infrastructure requirements to be able to build out a community like this. Are we going to get into kind of like the property tax side of what that development would look like and what the other non-road kind of infrastructure needs we may need to be thinking about, like, is this community going to need more police, more fire, more schools, those kinds of things? Are we ever going to get that granular?
I would, I guess, several points. We have no scheduled meeting for the committee on that topic. I think you should absolutely positively send those questions. And I mean, I know you abbreviated it to 4, but it's probably like 15 questions that are all interrelated. I think that's totally fair game. I think you should send those to Danielle. And I, just speaking for myself, am remaining relatively agnostic on when we get through the 12 committee meetings in just under 45 days with Thanksgiving jam-packed in the middle. I don't know. I don't have a preconceived notion of whether we're going to get to that point and feel like, wow, we covered it, or whether we're going to get to that point and say, gee, there's some more stuff that we want to know. And I think the only way to really find that out is to have these scheduled meetings, find out about questions that maybe aren't built into the agenda we've gotten. And I think we'll have a sense when we get through the scheduled meetings about whether it's closer to the, wow, we covered it, or there's more to talk about. So I think the best way to get us to be thinking about that is to submit the batch of questions, and the administration can take a crack at answering what they know at this point.
Will do.
All right, thank you. Anybody else? All right, no more meetings of the committee this week. Not coming back till next Wednesday. Thanks, everybody.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.